Tuesday night, I was knee-deep in Q3 variance notes, clicking through spreadsheets in my home office, when Mom called. Her voice had that calm, sugary edge she only uses when the decision's already made. "Victor, we need to talk about Thanksgiving," she said, dragging out the words like she hoped they'd land softer. "There are expectations on Brooke's fiancé's side, and it'll just keep things simpler if you don't come this year." "Define simpler," I said, already knowing. That's when Dad jumped in, on speaker, of course. The Danforths are tied into every board and foundation on the North Shore. Big names. Brooke deserves a clean runway, son. You understand? They always use that word, understand. Like I should agree with being erased. Mom jumped back in. "It's just, there'd be questions, Vic. You know, about your situation." "What situation?" She paused. "You're 58, still living light, and your work. It's hard to explain to people over dinner." I stared past my monitor at the wall. There was the plaque from last quarter's industry award, the signed letter from our biggest client thanking us for saving them 8 figures, the team photo from our Chicago office launch. But sure, nothing worth bringing up at a table full of donors and old money. I kept my voice level. "Got it." Mom let out a breath like she'd been holding it all day. "We'll do something just us," she said. "Maybe that weekend?" "I'll be in Dusseldorf," I said, finishing a deal. Dad laughed. "Come on, Victor, don't make stories." I bit down so hard on the inside of my cheek, I tasted blood. "I'll send a bottle," I said. "Something nice. Enjoy the holiday." I stayed on the screen till the call dropped. No space for a guilt trip. Quick note, before listening, share which city or country you're watching from. After the line went dead, I didn't move. Not because I was shocked, but because this was the same damn conversation we've been having since I was 19. Me not fitting into the mold. Me being the brother who never quite found his lane. I closed the variance file. Opened the checklist for our European fold-in. 2 signatures, 3 vendor rollovers, and a system cutover due Sunday. Then I texted Brooke. "Heard about Thursday. Not a problem. Hope it's a great night." She answered with 3 hearts and "it's complicated," which told me exactly who'd written the rules. Growing up, Brooke was 3 years younger and built for pictures. Bright smile, perfect homecoming shots, captain of something every season. Coaches loved her. Teachers remembered her name. I was the kid who took apart the VCR on the living room floor just to see how the gears lined up. Dad called that restless energy and said it needed direction, preferably a real trade or a proper degree. I tried the degree. 2 years of accounting at a state school. I learned the rules, memorized the language, and hated how slow everything moved. When a tiny logistics software startup offered me a junior analyst role, I took it. Dad said I was throwing away my future. Mom cried at the kitchen table. Brooke hugged me and said I'd be back by Christmas. I didn't go back. That first company built routing tools for trucking fleets. Nothing sexy. Just math, timing, and fuel costs. 18 months later, a bigger player bought the whole thing for $63 million. I didn't even understand half the legal language in the deal. After taxes, fees, and an option restrike, I learned about after the fact. I walked away with $5.1 million. I learned more from that term sheet than I did in 2 years of classes. I never told my parents, they never asked. After that software thing, they just kept saying I should get back on track and stop chasing shiny objects. So I stayed quiet and went to work. With that money, I started North Star Metrics. We built operating dashboards for mid-market manufacturers. AI-driven, but not flashy. Yield, scrap, procurement, freight. The guts of how plants actually run. We sold boring and delivered results. Year 2, we had 51 clients and $11.4 million in revenue. Year 5, 260 clients in 8 countries and $192 million. Last year, 420 clients in 15 countries and $410 million on the top line. I own 69% because I never took more capital than we needed. I rented a modest 2-bedroom near Wicker Park and let my family believe that was all there was. I didn't mention the $5.6 million penthouse I bought in River North under an LLC, or the place up in Door County where I fish alone and think straight. I drive a Porsche Taycan, but I park it 2 blocks away. When family drops by, I hand them the keys to my old pickup and say the Taycan's in the shop. Tuesday morning, I was across from Jordan Hahn at Ellie's, sipping burnt diner coffee while we reviewed the Rheinberg integration, supply chain flags, systems lag, payroll inconsistencies, cleaning up after legacy processes, nothing we hadn't seen before. Jordan flipped his tablet around. New VP of Finance starts Thursday. I glanced at the name and felt the hit right between the eyes. Grant Danforth. Same last name Mom had said, like it came wrapped in silver paper. Brooke's fiancé, North Shore money, old clubs. The kind of family that funds libraries and gets a wing named after Grandpa for something involving railroads. I kept my face still. Where did he come from? Booth MBA. Bain for 2, mid-market PE shop after that. Good references, solid temperament, good casework, no favors pulled. He applied through the standard channel, interviewed clean. Does he know who founded North Star? Jordan shrugged. Offer came from me. All the filings say V. Hale. Half the world reads it as VP Hale anyway. Think he assumes it's just another layered exec team. I nodded, slow. Jordan raised an eyebrow. Anything I need to know? Family politics? Nothing that affects business, I said, which was true enough. After breakfast, I told Jenna to run standard onboarding Thursday. Nothing special. Then I said, bring him to my office at 2:15 after I clear a block. She gave me a look like she already knew. Understood. That night, Brooke posted their engagement photos. Lake Michigan Pier at sunset. Blazer and boat shoes, every piece posed to signal quiet money. The caption read like a brochure, tradition, commitment, and legacy, feeling honored to join a family of excellence. I screenshotted it, not to save it, just to look at it without noise. I didn't follow her on socials, but things floated through. Someone would tag me, or the algorithm decided I needed to see it. And there it was, Brooke, lit from behind like she was stepping into a Hallmark ending, writing the script that left me outside again. I went to bed early, no whiskey, no laptop. Just the kind of quiet prep I haven't needed since varsity playoffs, back when I already knew the calls before the ball got snapped. At 6:30 a.m., I was already on the 30th floor with the skyline waking up behind me. The loop looked like a machine coming online, steady lights blinking to life, traffic inching through fog. Our office sits in a glass wraparound with 3 sides of view and not much to hide behind. I walked the halls, nodded to the early crew from ops, and sat down with Grant's file again. His work samples were tight, thoughtful structure, clean assumptions. Not brilliant, but competent. No shortcuts, no fluff. At 9:05, Jenna texted, "Grant's here, impressed by the build-out. Mentioned his dad toured our Kenosha's client last year." I replied, "Keep him with FP&A. Bring him to me at 2:15. By 10:40, another ping. He asked if he'll meet the founder today. I said you're tied up but want to see him this afternoon. I sent back, "Make it a good surprise." At 1:58, I adjusted my sport coat and stood behind my desk. Team photos hung right where I wanted them. No plaques, no awards. Just the stuff that actually matters. Product launches, whiteboard chaos. People bent over laptops at midnight with takeout containers in the frame. The kind of pictures that don't need captions to tell you who showed up when it counted. Jenna knocked once and walked in. Grant followed. He looked exactly how I expected. Navy suit, slim cut, white shirt, small check tie, that polished face you can drop into any boardroom and get nods. He had a leather folio under one arm and the look of a guy who thinks every room is his until proven otherwise. He extended his hand and gave a PR-grade smile, eyes drifting past me toward the skyline. Then it hit. That half-second pause. Smile slipped. Folio shifted. His hand stayed out, but his confidence dropped 5 degrees. "You're Brooke's brother," he said, like he wished he hadn't. I took his hand. "I'm Victor Hale. I founded North Star. Around here, I'm your boss's boss's boss. Sit down." He sat. He didn't settle. His eyes kept flicking toward the door, like someone else might walk in and fix this. "Brooke said you did consulting stuff," he mumbled. That you lived simple. Your mom called you independent. Family code for off script, I said. We're not here to talk about Thanksgiving. We're here to talk about your job. I walked him through his 30-day plan. Reinberg's forecasting overhaul, supplier risk modeling, weekly check-ins on my calendar every Monday at 8:30 sharp. He tried to slip in a line about Brooke visiting the office. You can call her on your break, I said. He swallowed that. Then he asked the one question I knew was coming. Does Brooke know about you and all this? She doesn't, I said. Nobody in my family ever asked the right questions. They filled in the blanks with a story they liked better. I slid him the deck for the Reinberg project and told him to walk me through it. He did fine. Missed 2 vendor flags, but caught a freight hedge mismatch and adjusted on the fly. Solid for day 1. When he finished, I said, You're here because you earned it. If you can do the job, we're good. He nodded, but the weight hadn't hit the floor yet. He left with notes in hand and his head down, like he already knew Brooke was going to have a full volume reaction. At 4:31, Brooke's name lit up my phone. I let it ring. She tried again. On the 3rd try, I picked up. What the hell, Victor? She snapped. You blindsided him. You made him look like an idiot. What game are you playing? It's not a game, I said. Grant was hired 7 weeks ago. He cleared interviews and references before your peer photo shoot hit my feed. Undo it. We don't fire qualified staff because family doesn't like where names land on the org chart. He's quitting. He does that, he gives up $175,000 in signing bonus and 4-year options. At our last mark, that's worth $2.4 million. She went quiet. The kind of quiet people hit when numbers get bigger than feelings. You're doing this to punish me, she said, voice smaller now. No, I told her. I'm running a company. She started crying. I waited through 2 breaths, then hung up. At 6:05, my phone buzzed with a FaceTime from Dad. Mom was already in the frame, sitting stiff, like this was a hearing. Dad had that look he gets when he thinks he's about to lay down rules. Mom opened with, Victor James, the full name she uses to pull me back into being 12. They didn't waste time. Is it true, Dad said, that you own some firm and that Brooke's fiancé reports into you? I didn't argue. I didn't soften it. I turned the camera around, slow. No drama, the North Star logo etched into the desk plate, the NAM and SME plaques on the credenza, the wall screen behind me with live dashboards, plants in 3 countries ticking along, green and yellow boxes pulsing like a heart monitor. I turned the camera back. This is my company. Dad shook his head. That's not possible. You never finished school, and you still rent. I did finish, I said. Just not the way you pictured. Adult degree completion later. Industry certs that matter to clients more than letters on a wall. And I rent 1 place. I own 2 others. Mom flinched like I'd slapped the table. I laid it out straight because there was no point dancing. First exit funded North Star. 420 clients in 15 countries. Last year, $410 million in revenue. Profitable. 312 employees. Last independent valuation at $3.4 billion. I own 69%. I didn't smile. Numbers don't care about tone. Mom asked why I'd hidden it. I didn't hide anything, I said. I just didn't advertise to people who never asked. Brooke popped into the call without warning, mascara streaks already down her cheeks. You humiliated me, she said. You made Grant look small. Grant will look however he chooses to look at work, I said. That's on him? Dad leaned forward. Then fix it. Transfer him, change his title. Have him report to someone else so the families can breathe. We don't reshuffle org charts for Thanksgiving, I said. We do it for the business. Grant was hired into FP&A to do a defined job. He'll do it or he won't. Brooke snapped. His father won't like this. Their family can like or dislike whatever they want, I said. Our probation clause is the same for everyone. If Grant walks, he walks into an explanation with his father and leaves money on the table. Mom pressed her lips tight. You're making this vindictive. I felt that old heat rise, but I kept my voice level. I've spent 30 years being the almost guy in your stories, the one who could be something if he'd just settled down. You disinvited me from Thanksgiving to make a cleaner picture. That's the only vindictive thing I've heard all week. Dad tried again, softer. We're old-fashioned. Old-fashioned would have been inviting your son to dinner, no matter who he married, I said. I tested whether I mattered to you without the shine. I got my answer. The call went quiet. Not dead, just hollow. I could feel the air drain out of the room on their end. Then Brooke whispered, I hate you. I didn't react. I just said, I have to prep for a Europe call, and ended it. 10 minutes later, the text dos cinco started coming in like rain. Mom asking me to be the bigger man. Dad asking for a private talk with the Danforths. Brooke asking if I'd rethink the contract. I didn't answer any of them. One message cut through. Grant, apologies for leaving early. Can we meet at 8 a.m. tomorrow to discuss scope? I typed back, yes, Jenna will schedule, and hit send. Grant showed up at 7:55 the next morning, 5 minutes early. He looked like hell, eyes red, jaw tight, but he was clean, pressed, and carried himself like he still wanted to be taken seriously. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. Apologies for the early exit yesterday, he said. No excuses. Noted, I said, and that was that. He shifted on his feet. Brooke wants me to resign. I figured. I told her no. That made me look up from my laptop. He continued. I spent half the night reading everything I could find on North Star. Case studies, trade write-ups, analyst breakdowns. It's a serious company. Serious work. I saw the numbers, the challenge, the visibility. This is a job I'd earned something in. I nodded. That's the first adult thing I've heard in 2 days. He gave a slight smile, just a twitch of the mouth. I didn't return it. I laid the rules down. No office gossip, no back-channeling family business into work. Bring me problems with options and numbers, not drama. Understood, he said, dead serious. We spent 2 hours locked in on supplier exposure, rolling 12-month cash forecasts, and a freight contract that had more hair on it than I remembered. I made it clear. This would be his test. At 1:10, my phone buzzed with an unknown North Shore number. I picked up. Mr. Hale, the voice said, smooth and deliberate. This is Charles Danforth. His tone was pure old boardroom, measured, polite, with the weight of a man who's negotiated his way through decades of family and finance. He said Brooke had called him upset, and he wanted my version. I kept it short. Grant applied, earned it, started, did fine, one early exit, back on track now. Charles paused. Is the role substantive? Yes. Good, he said. Then my son will stay. He needs to build something that's his. There was a pause I didn't fill. We'd like to meet, he said. Not as a negotiation, just courtesy. My wife and I would like to know the man our family clearly underestimated. I'll be there, I said. Before he hung up, he added, Thanksgiving is at our house this year. It matters to me that all sides show up. You're welcome. I thanked him and ended the call. I sat there for a second with the phone still in my hand, feeling that odd weight when a door swings open that you never knocked on. I texted Brooke. Had a good call with Mr. Danforth. He's aware. I'm invited Thursday. You can be mad at me if you want, but don't put this on Grant. She replied 2 minutes later. You're unbelievable. I actually laughed, alone in my office, not bitter, just surprised how predictable she still was. Grant came back from lunch with a file under his arm and 3 options on the freight issue, all of them workable. The third was the hardest, required reworking how we run vendor offsets, but it made the most long-term sense. I'd go with option C, he said, holding my eyes. You'll take heat for it, I warned. I can handle it. I gave him the nod. Then run it. He walked out without looking back. Straight spine, no drag in his step, like a man who finally figured out which way was forward. A few nights before Thanksgiving, Mom texted, Come to the house for dinner? No subject, no context, just that. I said yes, because sometimes you show up even when you already know what's coming. The house hadn't changed. Same carpet, same framed school photos on the wall. Same clock ticking way too loud in the corner. Mom was in the kitchen, straightening silverware that didn't need straightening. Dad sat in his usual chair, already talking about the Bears like the team might save us from the real conversation. Dinner was roast, boiled potatoes, green beans that had gone cold waiting for the talk. They didn't open with it until the plates were mostly empty. Dad set his fork down and leaned back. "We read about your company," he said. "North Star. There's a lot out there. It's impressive." He said it like he was reading from a write-up about someone who happened to share my name. Mom jumped in. "Why didn't you tell us? Really tell us?" "Because you never asked," I said. "Not really?" She looked away like the wallpaper might help. I kept going. "I let your version of me stand because I wanted to see if I mattered in it. Turns out I didn't." Dad frowned. "That's not fair." "Disinviting your son from a family holiday isn't fair either," I said. But here we are. The silence after that was heavier than the food. Like we were sitting across from each other as strangers who shared DNA and not much else. Finally, Dad said, quiet and flat, "We handled it wrong." First honest thing I'd heard from him in weeks. Mom reached for her water and said, "We were scared you'd embarrass Brooke. These people can change her life." "If they need a tidy picture to treat her with respect," I said, "they're not worth a pie." Nobody had a comeback for that. So I laid it out clean. "I'm going to the Danforths on Thursday because they invited me. I'm going to keep running my company. Grant's going to keep doing his job. If you want a relationship with me, it's going to be with the man I actually am, not the one you've been explaining to neighbors." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't ask for an apology. I wasn't looking for approval. I just made it clear. When it was done, Mom stood up and cleared the plates. I told her I didn't want dessert, not because I was angry, but because the table was already clean, and there wasn't anything sweet left to add. At the door, she hugged me like it hurt. "Please think about Christmas," she whispered. "I will," I said, and I meant it. The Danforth place sat on a rise in Lake Forest, tucked behind a line of old oaks that looked like they'd been standing there since before zoning laws. I pulled the Tay can between two quiet German sedans and cut the engine. Cold air rushed in as I opened the door. I paused on the porch, took one of those slow, grounding breaths, like the kind you take before a cold lake in June. Charles answered the door himself, Ellen right behind him. No staff, no show. Just two people who knew how to host without making it a ceremony. Charles shook my hand firm and said, "Glad you came." Ellen added, "We've heard a lot, mostly good." She smiled and it felt real. Inside, the place was warm but not flashy. Hard wood that creaked in the right spots. Family photos everywhere. A piano with the lid up and a chocolate lab snoring on a rug that probably cost more than my office chairs. Grant was near the fireplace, flanked by cousins and holding a lowball like it weighed more than it did. Brooke stood just off to his side in a dress that probably had a name. When she saw me, her face dropped half an inch, smile held like a board across her teeth. I nodded, didn't wait for her to come over. Charles didn't waste time. He waved me into the room and said, "This is Victor Hale, the man whose software kept 3 of our plants out of the red last year." That got 2 uncles to turn their heads. The younger one asked something about predictive maintenance. I answered. The older one asked about load shifting and off-peak ops. We got into it quick. No awkward dance. Nobody asked what I really did. At dinner, I got placed between Ellen and a retired federal regulator. We talked about the sausage making of policy writing and why line workers hate systems built by people who've never walked the floor. I kept it simple. Fewer clicks, better uptime. Talk to the guys who punch in at 5 a.m. They know where the problems are. Brooke was down at the far end, stuck next to a cousin who kept steering things toward wedding plans. I answered what I was asked and didn't look for her eyes. When dessert landed, Charles stood with a glass in hand. He said, "Nameplates are nice, so are legacies. But there's a difference between being born into something and building something. Families can be peacocks, or they can be barns." Then he raised his glass. "To Grant's boss, Victor, who builds barns." Laughter all around, the good kind. I felt it down in my chest. Grant held my eyes and lifted his glass. That little nod of earned respect was there now. 2 days ago, it wasn't. Brooke wiped at her cheek and stared at her plate. I didn't watch her long. I knew if I did, I'd say something sharp that would stick, and I didn't want that. After coffee, she found me in a hallway lined with old black and white photos. She stepped in close and said, "You won." I looked at her. "I didn't win. I stopped losing." "Same thing." "No," I said. "I never wanted your seat. I wanted mine." She folded her arms. "You make everything harder." "No," I said. "I make everything honest." She squinted like she was about to push back, so I asked plain, "Would you be happier if I really were broke?" She didn't answer, just muttered, "You're exhausting," and walked off. On the way out, Ellen pressed a foil-wrapped slice of pie into my hand. "Come back for Sunday football sometime. Bring that dashboard that makes Charles pretend he's still on the factory floor." I laughed. First time all week it came easy. In the car, engine warming, a text lit up the screen. "We want to try again. Just Christmas, the four of us. No show." I stared at it until the windshield fogged. Then I typed, "I'll think about it," and hit send. Maybe that was small, but for now, it felt like the right size. I got home and opened my laptop like I always did when the house was quiet. Grant had sent his Reinberg analysis at 6:42 p.m., 15 tabs, 3 scenarios, and a recommendation that made sense, even though it wasn't the easy one. I read the whole thing twice and felt that clean click you get when someone might actually grow into the job you gave them. I sent him a note, "Good work, let's walk it Monday. Expect procurement to fight you." He replied right away, "Thank you, understood. Happy Thanksgiving." I wrote back the same and meant it. Then I emailed Jenna one line for next week. Add Brooke and Grant to the Joliet plant tour. No VIP list, no shortcuts. They'd walk the line, talk to operators, and see what work looks like when it isn't dressed for a room full of donors. At midnight, Mom texted, "We are proud of you. I'm sorry." I didn't answer, not because I wanted her to sit in it, but because sometimes you leave a door half open and let the other person decide whether they'll cross the room. Friday morning, I took the Taycan out early and drove the lakefront before the city woke up. I thought about Dad teaching me to tape my wrists before Pop Warner, about Brooke asleep on my shoulder during long drives when she was little, about all the times I could have shoved my wins in their faces and didn't. Back at the office, I dropped pie on the break room table and told the weekend crew to help themselves. I walked past the wall of photos and stopped at the one from our first rented room. A folding table, 2 laptops, 4 tired faces, and laughed at how sure we were that we were already late. Monday would be meetings and elbows. Grant would either bring his spine or he wouldn't. Brooke would either make peace with the fact that I don't fit her caption or she wouldn't. Mom and Dad would either show up at Christmas with empty hands and open ears or they wouldn't. Either way, I had work to do. Kenosha needed a cleaner sequence. Joliet's freight line was still wrong. Reinberg's cutover wasn't going to walk itself. I wasn't a picture on a mantle. I was a man who builds barns. I shut the laptop, stacked the folders by the door, set my alarm, rinsed my mug, locked the window, checked the calendar for Monday, and turned out the light, already moving toward a morning that would start early and demand numbers, decisions, and follow-through from me before anyone else asked what I really did when the doors opened again.